Hello and welcome back to the Acceleration Netcast. In today's episode, we've got some data that on first glance might look like tabular data, but it's not, it's report data. And the way you can tell the difference is here, in the thing that looks like tabular data, you've got these rows that are essentially subtotal rows, right? So all of this data essentially corresponds to invoice 01. And here below it, you've got sort of a summary of results for invoice 1. And you've got the subtotal there, and you've also got the date of the invoice and the invoice number. And really, this invoice number and this date, these should be columns over here like you've got over here. So what we want to do is we want to grab the invoice number, we want to grab the date, and sort of move them over to their own separate columns and get rid of these subtotal rows. So let's go ahead and start doing that. So we're going to start by heading up to Power Query, and we're going to get data from a file. It's going to be a CSV today. There's our data. We're going to click OK, which is going to launch the Power Query dialog. Let's see. First thing I'm going to do, just to get into the habit of it, I'm just going to call this query clean grouped data. And by grouped, I mean it's sort of broken up into groups, so it's got subtotals. Okay, so now that we've got that name there, let's go ahead and get started. Now we're going to be able to do most of what we do today through the GUI, which is nice. We're not going to have to go into the advanced editor. So let's go ahead and start. We're going to add a custom column. The first custom column is going to basically check to see if a row is a subtotal row or not. So we're going to call this is subtotal. Yeah, not the most clever name in the world, but I think it's pretty functional. Okay, so what are we going to look for? Well, we're going to start by doing a text.contains. And we're going to pull the string from text number, and we're going to see if it contains invoice. In fact, I'm going to go one further and see if it contains invoice : space. Okay. And if it contains invoice : space, we're going to say, well, then it's not really a transaction number, it's a subtotal row. And that's exactly what we want. Although, just to make things a little bit nicer here, this text num, sometimes, like here, this is a text string. Other places it might be a numeric value. So we're going to go ahead and convert this. If it is a numeric value, we're going to convert it to a text string by using the text.from function. Text.from. Okay, so we're going to take the value from transaction number, convert it to text, and see if that text contains the text string invoice : space in it. If it does, return a true. If not, return a false. Okay. All right, there we go. So so far it's looking right. Here, where we've got essentially tabular data, we've got a false, which is what we want. Here, where we've got a subtotal row, it contains true. Now, for a small data set like this, I could just kind of eyeball it real quick. For a larger data set, I'm going to remove this step from the final query, but just so I could sort of make myself a bit more confident, I'm going to click up here, sort ascending, and make sure that all the places where it's false, it doesn't look like a subtotal row, and all the places that it's true, it does look like a subtotal row. Okay, that looks right. I'm going to go ahead and click on this X to cancel that step. All right, so now that we're pretty convinced that this column here predicts whether or not it's a subtotal row or not, we're going to go ahead and start extracting these bits of data. We're going to start with the easier one first, which is this date. So we're going to add custom column. We're going to call this invoice date. Call it whatever you want. Okay, so what we want to know is if that subtotal row, we could say equals true, but since it already is a true-false value, we're just going to leave it blank. So if it's true, then I want you to grab the value from product ID. Now, it's not really product ID because here on these rows, it's actually the date. So we're going to grab the date. And if it's not true, then we're just going to return null or empty. So we're going to go ahead and click OK. All right, good. So now we've got our date, which is exactly what we want. We're going to add, now we're going to extract the invoice number. This one's a little more complicated, but also not too bad. We're going to call this invoice, got to spell it right, number. Boy, batting 1,000 today. Invoice number. Okay. And, well, what is this one? Same deal. We're going to test if that subtotal, we could say equals true, but since it's a true-false column, we're just going to, it's the same thing as equals true. So if subtotal is true, well then, what I want you to do is we're going to start by grabbing this guy right here. So it's going to grab that entire text string, but I don't want the whole thing. I just want the 001 part. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap that around a text.replace function. So, all right, so you want to replace some text. Where do you want to start? We'll start by grabbing this text string here. Okay, well, what text do you want to replace inside of this text string? Well, I want you to go ahead and look for invoice : space. Look for that text string. Okay, and what would you like me to replace it with? I would like you to replace it with nothing. An empty text string. Null string. Okay? Otherwise, no. Let's see if I did all this right. Yeah, there we go. So now we've got our date and our numbers. Now you might be asking yourself, well, wait, we've only got it for the subtotal rows. We don't want it for the subtotal rows. We want them for the tabular data rows. Well, okay, we can solve that problem very easily. We're going to click on that column, shift click there. We're going to head over to transform. We're going to go to fill up. And what fill up is going to do is basically everywhere there's a null, it's going to look down to the nearest value and just pull it up. So you can imagine these values fill up through the nulls. This value fills up through the nulls. Okay, great. So now for each one of these transactions, we've got the correct invoice date and invoice number. Finally, the last sort of two steps is we're going to get rid of, well, we're not going to get rid of it. We're going to get rid of the subtotal rows first. We're going to do that by filtering to remove the trues. So we're only going to keep the falses, or we're only going to keep the rows that are not subtotals. There we go. We've only got tabular data. And finally, we're going to remove the is subtotal row because the end user doesn't really want to see that. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and close and load. And we are all done. Okay, well, I do hope that was helpful, and I will see you next video. Quick postscript. So I just realized as I was finishing this thing up that when Power Query loaded this, it managed to convert these dates to text, and you could tell by going is text. And you go up here and click OK. Oh, so that's not really a date, that's a text string. So we want to go ahead and fix that. So we're going to fix that very quickly. Head up here to edit. We're just going to click here, right click on it, change type to date. Great, there we go. Now when we go close and load, hopefully, now if we do equals is text, click somewhere in there, hit enter, false. Great, okay, that's it. I hope that was even more helpful, and I will see you next video.